Hello pretties, welcome back to a new sewing video. I am very excited about today's video because it is, did I mention it's a sewing video? Yeah, it's a sewing video. We're recreating Isabela's dress from the Disney movie Encanto. My niece is having an Encanto theme birthday party. My favorite character is Isabela, so of course I had to make her dress. Isabela's dress is a little complicated. It has a lot of different layers and it requires different fabrics and a lot of flowers. I made a mock dress just because before I cut any of the actual fabric, I wanted to be sure that one, sizing was gonna be okay and that it was gonna look good. And it looks so adorable. I'm gonna show you it. Just keep in mind, this is not a finished product. I didn't handmade. It was quick sewing. I did not add all the things that I'll be adding to the dress. I just wanted to get an idea of how it was gonna look and if the pattern that I created for the bottom half would look good. I'm gonna show you that now. This is the bodice. I added ruffles, but I didn't make it in the V shape, which I will do in for the actual dress. Isabela's dress has two ruffles on the sleeves, like two tiers of ruffles on the sleeve. I only added one because again it was quick, but for the actual dress there's two. This is the first tier, second, and the last. As you know, the dress is cut, like the tiers on the dress is on a diagonal, so that's what I did. And this is the back. I only added one button, but it requires three. I made the buttonholes, I just didn't add them. It requires three. Okay, so let's get to the fun stuff. I'm gonna show you the materials, the appliques that I purchased, the pattern that I used, and we'll go from there. The pattern that I'm using is by company Peony Patterns. This is the Jasmine pattern. This is the different ways that you can make this pattern. Essentially, this is a short dress. I made it long, so I added length to it, and I used the simple skirt pattern instead of the tiered because I added the tiers in differently. If I had made the tier dress following the pattern, it would be attached, but Isabela's dress is flowy. The tiers aren't attached to one another. For flowers, this is what I purchased. Chiffon appliques, flower appliques. I also bought this one. This is purple. I don't know if you can see it, like a very soft lavender. And these are pink, of course. I bought these in purple as well. I plan on cutting these off so I can attach them individually instead of in the row. I purchased this lilac from fabric.com. It's a matte satin. I'll be using this for the bodice and for the underskirt, for the three layers, the three tiers of the skirt. The bodice I won't be layering with anything else. It'll be this fabric. And because this fabric is a little thicker than I anticipated, I decided to make the lining in cotton just so that it won't be heavy and it's a lot softer and easier to wear. And for the ruffles on the bodice and also for the top of the skirt tiers, I'll be using this solid lavender chiffon. For the sleeve, I purchased a pearled tulle in lavender. I purchased it from Etsy. Okay, so to begin, you need two front bodice pieces. One is a main for the main bodice and one is for the lining, so you need two of those. 4 back bodice mirror images. So 2 of them will be the bodice and then the other 2 the lining. 2 sleeves, no lining, just 2 main pieces, 2 sleeves. You need 2 strap pieces. You need the ruffles for the neckline. And this is one layer of the ruffles for the sleeve and the second layer ruffle for the sleeves. I made them, of course, different lengths because one is longer than the other. So this is for the bodice. These are the pieces that you need for the bodice. Now for the skirt, you need 2 pieces for the placket. So 2 main pieces, 2 of the satin I cut. And then here is how I did the skirt. Layer 1, this is the layer that's going to be under, or layer 3, this is the layer that's going to be under. At the measurements for the bottom layer, I used the width that's indicated in the pattern, and I added the length that I desired. This is layer 2, cut at a diagonal. For the second layer, I used the same width and I cut it in a diagonal at half the length of the third layer. And then here is the top layer. And for the top layer, I did the same exact thing, the same width, and I cut it at half the length of the second layer. I'm going to cut a satin of each layer, also chiffon of each layer. For the second layer, I decided to use the pearl fabric. So for that layer, I'll use one satin and one of that pearl tulle fabric. Now let's get to sewing. The first thing I'm gonna do, because I feel it's the hardest, is the ruffles for the neckline and also the ruffles for the sleeves. For the ruffles of the neckline, I made a V shape like her dress, and I'm gonna use some of the satin fabric to make a bias tape to put around the hem. Isabela's dress has bias tape on all the hems, like on the hem of the ruffles for the bodice, on the sleeves, on each tier. So I'm gonna create my own bias tape by cutting a piece of the satin fabric and folding it over twice to create a bias tape. Essentially, that's what a bias tape is. A piece of fabric sectioned off into 4 pieces. So we're gonna do that now. So here's how I'm making my bias tape. I fold over the fabric so that I can cut on the folds, and the length of the ruffle is 17 and a quarter. I'm just gonna bring it up to 10 inches. It's better to have more than to be missing a piece. So I'm bringing it over to 10 length, and the width is gonna be the width of this ruler, which is 2 inches. So I marked. I'm just gonna close it here. So here is the bias tape. You're gonna create your folds with the wrong side. So wrong side to wrong side, fold over, and then we're gonna press it. Okay, and then open it up. Now you have that crease there, and bring one side to that crease in the middle that we created, and also iron it down, and do the same thing to the other side. Now I'm just gonna fold it over again to half, just to reestablish that middle line. And now when you open it, you have 4 sections. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's my ruffle. Right side to right side, I'm gonna pin. We're gonna stitch right on the first little stitch here. Just let your needle fall right on that fold and stitch all the way. Here is that stitch. This is a little bit hard to explain, so I'm gonna number all the 4s. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, you just stitch to the edge of the ruffle. So you're gonna bring 3 and cover 4 over. So you fold that over together, and now you have pieces 1 and 2. Bring 1 over to 2, fold, and now fold over. That seam is covered. And now you stitch it down close to the fold again. So 3 covers 4, and then 1 covers 2, and then you have the seam and the fold. You bring the fold over the seam so that now the seam is covered. There we go. And now you stitch very close to the fold there. I have now applied my bias tape, and it looks pretty nice. Looks very cute. Okay, so the next step is to gather this. Okay, so we're gonna leave a tail, and we're gonna use a basting stitch or a long stitch on the edge of the fabric here so that we can gather. Let's set the ruffles aside for a minute and move on to the bodice. Okay, so step one, to stabilize the back bodice buttonhole area, we're gonna cut a strip of fusible interfacing. And on the left side of the back bodice lining, we are going to apply it. Flip the lining over to the wrong side and add the interfacing here. I'm gonna grab the straps and we're gonna apply interfacing to both of them. So make sure that your piece of interfacing is shorter than the strap, and also cut it to a smaller width and place it right in the middle. Now grab your straps and with wrong sides together, we're gonna fold over the strap halfway and press. So wrong side to wrong side. I'm just gonna hold it together with these pins. And on the fold, right here on the fold, not the edge, on the fold, we're gonna top stitch using 1/8 seam allowance. Okay, here is that top stitch. My fabric was fraying a little bit, so I cut a tiny little piece of the edge with my shear scissors. Here is the other strap, the top stitch. And now, on the edge of the fabric, we're going to baste using a 1/4 seam allowance. Here is the basting stitch. Here's the basting stitch. And now we're gonna set these aside. I basted the ruffles and I gathered it to the length of the edge of the front bodice. Then I basted that on. I'm a little worried because the ruffles are like sticking up, but I'm just going to attach the strap and the layer of lining and hope that when the lining is applied, it'll come down. I'm gonna grab my strap, right side of the strap, and the basted end, attach it to the corner top of the bodice, like right by the armhole. So one here and one here. Remember, the basted end is the one that's near the armhole. We're gonna baste that into place using a 1/4 seam allowance. Okay, so you see the straps basted on now. Now I'm gonna take the lining, the front bodice lining, and I'm gonna place it over and pin it with right sides together. And now to attach this, we're gonna sew at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Here's my ruffle attached. It's still lifting, but I'm gonna deal with that later. I might just add a flower there, or I might just tack it down a little. I'll figure it out later. But I did make a new ruffle because the other one, the bias tape was too wide and it's too heavy for the chiffon fabric. I think that's why it's still lifting, because of the heaviness of the fabric. So after I attached the ruffle and the straps, I turned it right side out, I ironed, and then I top stitched, which also helped bring down the ruffles. Okay, so the next step is grab your bodice and flip it so that the lining is facing you. With the right side of your back bodice piece, you're gonna attach the strap. The raw basted area will be lined with the corner here. Near the armhole. Attach it and baste, and then we're gonna baste this at using a 1/4 seam allowance. And we're gonna do the same thing for this side. This is the right side, and this is the raw edge of the strap. Now we're gonna baste it across at 1/4 seam allowance, both sides. And now that that has been basted on, we're gonna apply the lining on top, pin it, Okay, so now that it's pinned, we're gonna take it to the sewing machine, and using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, we're gonna sew starting from the top raw edge all the way down to the center back. Okay, that is now done, both sides. Now I'm gonna take my shears and cut some of the seam allowance and round off the corner. We are going to turn it right side out. Point out the corners. I'm gonna press it, and once I press it, I'm gonna top stitch. Up next, we are going to separate the main bodice and the bodice lining from each other. And we're gonna flip the back bodice down for a second. So separate it. Then bring the back bodice back up and attach it to the front bodice lining at the sides. And then make sure your strap is not twisted. Leave it tucked in and line up the bodice, the front bodice with the back bodice. And then we're gonna do the same thing for the next side. We're gonna sew the sides, all 4 sides, at 1/2 inch seam allowance. Again, make sure that the straps are not twisted. They're just tucked under. Now that the 4 sides are stitched down, we're gonna open the seam and press it. Press it open. Once all the seams have been ironed, pressed open, turn everything to the right side out. Okay, and now we're gonna set this aside and work on the sleeves. Here are my sleeves, but first I have to work on the ruffles. So here are the 2 sets of ruffles for the sleeve. I'm gonna add the bias tape, which I'm gonna make. I am sorry for the noise in the background. There's like full house in my house today. But I want to talk about these sleeves. Oh my god, it's been so hard to make these sleeves. I have tried so many different methods because I really wanted to line the chiffon with satin fabric, but it's way too heavy and it's just not working. So what I'm gonna do is chiffon and chiffon. Is that how you say it? I feel like that word sounds weird, but I'm just gonna line it with the same fabric. So this is how it looks, this bottom part with the bias. Here is the ruffles for the sleeve. I'm gonna line it right side to right side with the sleeve. The tulle fabric is very pretty, but it's a little difficult to work with at times because the pearls get on the way and it will get stuck in the sewing machine. So here I am cutting off some of the pearls so that I can stitch it down. Okay, so now I'm gonna stitch this down at a 1 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now we're gonna separate it, flip it to the back, and again separate. Bring the seam down and tuck 1/4 in, and then we're gonna stitch this down. Okay, so I pinned it down in the back. And when I flip it over, this is how it will look. One thing that I forgot to mention in the materials portion is that you need elastic. At this point, grab your elastic and feed it through, which you should have gotten the measurement from the pattern recommendation based on the size that you're making, the size dress that you're making. Once you have fed the elastic all the way through, pin it down on one end and continue so that you can continue to pull out the other end through the other side. And then once both ends are in, you're gonna bring the elastic in, allow the elastic to go back into the fabric about 1/2 inch, and that's where you're gonna sew. Sew down the elastic. So I pulled my elastic into this portion, and that's where I'm gonna sew about 1/2 inch in. Unless it's a gathering stitch, remember to always backstitch. Now with right sides together, line up both ends of the sleeves to close it. Now turn the sleeve to the right side, and we're gonna stitch down that seam to one side towards the back of the sleeve. This is the final result of how the sleeve looks, and this is how it will look once it's attached to the dress. To attach the sleeve, find the sleeve seam and match it to the bodice side seam, and then just pin all around. And this is the final result of both sleeves attached. And the ruffles turned out really cute. The first layer, here's the satin and here's the chiffon. I attached it with the serger, and at the ends I'm gonna leave it, I'm not gonna attach it. So I'm gonna do 2 different hems, and I think that'll look nicer. Measure the hem so that I can cut and make my own bias tape. 32. So I have a piece of scrap fabric left over here. I'm gonna make it widthwise 1 inch thickness. Okay, so the way I'm gonna do the hem is I'm gonna use chiffon for the satin, and for the chiffon, I'm gonna use the satin. I'm not gonna make the markings with the iron because working with chiffon is already very hard, and it's just easier this way. I'm just gonna attach it and then sew at a 1/4 seam allowance, and then I'll go from there. Okay, so I'm gonna stitch it down at a 1/4 seam allowance. Here it is, it's attached. So now I'll fold over, and then once I fold this over, I will go ahead and cover the seam with that fold. So fold over and cover the seam. And I'm gonna pin it so that when I sew it, it doesn't move. It's all pinned down at this point. Now I'm gonna flip it to the right side and catch it from the front. I'm gonna stitch very close to the seam line and making sure that I catch the other side of the fabric. Making sure I catch the back of the fabric when I'm stitching down. Okay, so here's the hem. Now I'm gonna do the hem on this one. To make my life a little less complicated, I'm just going to cut out, instead of going by one, I'm gonna make all the hem, all the bias tapes beforehand. So I'm gonna go all the way across, and I'm also gonna use this width. So I should get maybe 4 out of this one. Let's see. I'm no longer gonna use the satin fabric to do the for bias tape because it's just too heavy for this for the chiffon fabric. So I'm just gonna stick with the chiffon fabric to do the next layers of bias tape. And this one is a little like it's standing up a little bit, but it's fine because I'm gonna apply flowers. I'm gonna sew flowers onto this. Where is there flower? Since I'm gonna be attaching flowers, it's fine. It'll hold it down. But just moving forward with the next layers, I am not gonna use the satin for bias. We're gonna move on to our skirt. I'm gonna attach all the layers. So here's the first layer, here's the second, and here is the third. I made sure that everything is lining up. I pinned all across, and now I'm gonna stitch it together. Since I searched the edge of each one, I'm gonna run a stitch line right through that serge line. So as you can see here, I drew a straight line 3 inches long, and at the ends, at a 45-degree diagonal, I added 2 little lines, both at a 1/4 inch, and I cut it in the middle. I cut it, and then I cut the little sides. Here is where we're going to add the placket. This W is going to help with that curve of adding the placket so that it could end up being a straight line. So we're going to do this on the wrong side. Flipping it over to the wrong side. And with the right side of the placket, I'm going to line it up. Making sure all the layers of fabric are lining up well. We're gonna sew really slow to avoid pinching of the fabric using a 1/4 seam allowance. So just stitch straight across. Okay, so here is my placket. It sounds so simple, but it's not that simple. There's a little bit of pinching in mine probably, but I think it's fine. It's not bad. So now fold the seam up and press it. Okay, so now we're gonna fold the top of the placket at 3/4, wrong sides together. So it'll be folded this way. Make sure it's 3/4. Once you find your 3/4, press. This is what we should be looking at. And now we're gonna fold over again, 3/4, covering that seam. And now we are going to edge stitch right on the fold of that seam that we covered. Edge stitch all the way across. Stitch from the front, and here it is, the back. A little bit of the W slipped out for me, but that's okay because this is on the inside. Trim off any excess placket that you may have on the sides. Turn your skirt to the right side now, and we're going to take this left placket and fold it inside. Inside, like this, and we're going to stitch up here. We're going to base it up here at a 1/4 seam allowance. Okay, so the final step on the placket was to whip the skirt, turn to the front, flip the left side of the placket to the inside of the skirt, and baste it at the top using a 1/4 seam allowance. Now that that's done, we're gonna move on to constructing the skirt. Here's the back of the skirt, and I'm gonna place the front skirt on top. Now we have to make sure that all the layers line up. Before I do that, to make it easier, I'm gonna baste the sides of my skirt so that all the layers are staying together. I decided on the serger instead of basting so that I could get rid of extra fabric that was just hanging off. At this point, both the front and back skirt have been serged, so the sides are clean. There's no extra fabric hanging off. So now put it together, sew it at the sides, putting in the permanent stitch. Okay, that is done. I'm gonna add some flowers there, so that'll be fine. The next step is to gather and then add the bodice. This is way too thick to gather, so I'm gonna have to use the dental floss trick. Okay, so as far as the dental floss trick goes, you grab the dental floss and don't cut it because it needs to be longer than the length. So wherever you're gonna start gathering, we're not gonna gather the placket. So I'm gonna place the dental floss right here, and then I'm gonna zigzag stitch using a wider zigzag and making sure that the dental floss does not get caught in the zigzag. So you're gonna zigzag all around with the dental floss in the middle. Do not let your dental floss get caught. Add a little bit of a tail too, so I'm gonna have it starting right at the point you should leave a little bit of a tail, just like you would if you're gathering correctly. It's really hard to sew and show at the same time, but I'm gonna try. Go slowly until you get the hang of it. I'm gonna add a clip here to hold the floss in place. Okay, moment of truth. Let's see. Yep, it's working. Just pull on the dental floss and keep sliding together like you would gather normally.
Continue to gather the skirt around the perimeter of the bodice.
Here is the seam. I'm lining it up. Keep on pulling and gathering until the seams match up perfectly. I gathered until the skirt fit around the bodice, and now right side to right side I am putting in the final stitch using a 1 inch seam allowance. Final results, I added in flower appliques.
This is now the final result. I added flowers in no specific order, just how I thought it looked cute. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know how you think I did, how the dress turned out. Let me know if you're gonna try it or if you do try it. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Oh, I also made little mochila bags for her birthday party as goodie bags for the guests. So here's a picture of that, and also a picture of the decoration setup that my sister and I did for my niece. If you're interested in event planning, you can check us out on Instagram at Hanny's Decor. Okay, bye for now. Thank you for watching.